The massive bridge of the HMS Pathfinder buzzed with nervous energy as the crew ran through their final checks. Captain Lee watched through the ship's enormous viewing window, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. 15 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and humanity's dreams of reaching the stars had all led to this moment. Engineering reports all systems nominal, called out Lieutenant Park from his station. His voice carried a slight tremor. They all felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. This wasn't just another military test flight. This was humanity's first real shot at beating the cosmic speed limit. The Pathfinder itself was a sight to behold. Nearly 2 kilometers long, its sleek hull housed the revolutionary wormhole core that promised to change everything. The core wasn't just another engine, it was a machine designed to punch a hole through the fabric of space itself. Captain Lee walked slowly between the bridge stations, checking in with each crew member. She could see the mixture of excitement and fear in their eyes. They'd trained for this moment in countless simulations, but everyone knew the real thing would be different. The ship's chief engineer had once described the wormhole core as trying to fold the universe like a piece of paper. Now they would find out if the universe was willing to be folded. Status report from medical, announced Communications Officer Rodriguez. All crew members' biosensors are showing elevated heart rates, but within expected parameters. Lee nodded. It would have been more worrying if people weren't nervous. Through the window, Earth hummed like a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. The Pathfinder had been positioned carefully, far enough from any major gravity wells to avoid interference with the jump, but close enough for rescue ships to reach them if something went wrong. Not that anyone liked to talk about that possibility. Core temperature optimal, reported Lieutenant Park. Quantum field stabilizers are holding steady. His fingers danced across his holographic display, making minute adjustments. They all knew the theory by heart. The core would create a controlled quantum tunnel through spacetime, allowing the ship to cross vast distances instantly. In simulations, it looked beautiful, like threading a needle through the fabric of reality. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, but there was an underlying tension in every movement. They were about to attempt something that had only existed in science fiction just 2 decades ago. The United Earth government had poured trillions into this project, bringing together the finest minds from every nation to solve what had seemed like an impossible challenge. Time check, Captain Lee announced, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. 15 minutes to core activation. The words sent a ripple of focused energy through the bridge. Crew members double and triple checked their stations, running through mental checklists they'd practiced thousands of times. Through the internal cameras, Lee could see similar scenes playing out across the ship. In engineering, teams of physicists and technicians monitored the core's complex systems. In medical, doctors prepared for any possible complications from humanity's first intentional manipulation of spacetime. Even the ship's AI seemed more alert than usual, its status indicators pulsing with increased frequency. As the final minutes ticked down, Lee thought about everything that had led to this moment. The breakthrough at CERN that had first suggested this might be possible. The years of international cooperation that followed. The countless failed experiments and setbacks. The triumph when the first microscopic wormhole had been sustained for a fraction of a second. Now they were about to attempt something infinitely more ambitious. If it worked, the Pathfinder would jump 50 light-years in an instant, proving that humanity could finally reach for the stars in earnest. If it failed, well, they'd all volunteered knowing the risks. 5 minutes to core activation, announced the ship's AI in its calm, measured voice. Captain Lee took her command chair, feeling the familiar comfort of its support. Around her, the bridge crew settled into their final preparations, each person focused entirely on their role in the historic moment about to unfold. The future of human space travel rested on what would happen in the next few minutes. As the core began its initial power-up sequence, Lee couldn't help but wonder if they were about to make history, or become a cautionary tale about human ambition reaching too far too fast. In the dimly lit physics lab aboard the Pathfinder, Dr. Kim stared at his screens with growing unease. Something wasn't right. The quantum readings from the wormhole core were dancing in patterns he'd never seen before. After 5 years as the ship's lead physicist, he knew every quirk of the massive machine they'd built, and this was different. "Run the diagnostic again," he told his assistant, trying to keep his voice casual. "No need to spark panic, not with the whole world watching." The younger scientist nodded and tapped the commands into her console. Around them, banks of sophisticated equipment hummed and blinked, monitoring the incredibly complex physics that made their mission possible. The results came back the same. Dr. Kim pulled up the archived data from their test simulations, comparing them side by side with the live readings. The differences were subtle but unmistakable. Where there should have been steady quantum fluctuations, there were instead odd spikes and dips, like ripples in a pond that shouldn't have any waves. "What do you make of this?" he asked his team, projecting the readings onto the main screen. The other physicists gathered around, their faces lit by the blue glow of the holographic displays. They'd run thousands of simulations over the years, tested every possible scenario they could think of. But nothing in their data matched what they were seeing now. Through the lab's reinforced windows, they could see the massive cylinder that housed the wormhole core. It took up nearly a quarter of the ship's length, a triumph of engineering that had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Right now, it was powering up for the jump, building the enormous energies needed to tear a hole in space itself. One of the junior physicists pointed to a particular set of readings. "Look at the quantum entanglement patterns," he said, his finger tracing the irregular line. "It's almost like the core is resonating with something, but that's not possible, right?" Dr. Kim felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. They were seeing something new, something their equations hadn't predicted. Under normal circumstances, this would be exciting, a chance to learn something new about the nature of reality. But not now, not with the jump just minutes away and the eyes of every government on Earth watching their every move. His desk computer chimed with another message from Command, asking for final confirmation that all systems were go. The United Earth government had invested everything in this project. The military was counting on this technology to defend Earth's growing network of colonies. The public was expecting a new era of space exploration. Dr. Kim's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He should report the anomaly. That would be the proper scientific procedure. But he knew what would happen: months of delays, new committees, endless questions. And maybe these readings meant nothing. After all, they were doing something that had never been done before. Some unexpected readings were natural, right? The intercom crackled. "Physics lab, this is Bridge. We need your final confirmation for jump preparation." Captain Lee's voice was steady, professional. She trusted her team to speak up if there were any problems. Through another window, Dr. Kim could see Earth floating in the distance. Beautiful and fragile, a reminder of everything they were working to protect and advance. Humanity had dreams of reaching the stars, and he was part of making that dream real. Could he really delay everything because of some unusual readings that might mean nothing? "Dr. Kim?" The voice from the bridge prompted again. His team looked at him expectantly. They'd seen the readings too, but they were waiting for his decision. He was the one who had to make the call. He took a deep breath, his mind racing through possibilities. The core was stable, that much was certain. The anomalies were in the quantum field patterns, not in any of the critical systems. Maybe this was just how reality behaved when you actually tried to bend it, rather than just running simulations. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Soon, they would light up their wormhole core and attempt something humanity had only dreamed of. The question was, would they do it now with these strange, unexplained readings, or would they step back, delay everything, possibly for nothing? Dr. Kim reached for the intercom button, knowing that whatever he decided next would change everything, one way or another. Core activation sequence initiated. The AI's calm announcement echoed through the Pathfinder's bridge as blue light pulsed through the ship's veins. Inside the massive engine room, the wormhole core hummed to life, its sound unlike anything human ears had heard before. A deep vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Captain Lee gripped her command chair's arms, her knuckles white. "All stations, report status." Around her, the bridge crew called out their readings one by one, their voices steady despite the tension filling the air. The ship shuddered slightly as power flowed into the core. Through the main viewport, space itself seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Several crew members blinked and rubbed their eyes, unsure if what they were seeing was real or just their imagination playing tricks. Core at 30% capacity, announced engineering. The deck plates began to vibrate beneath their feet. Warning lights flickered across control panels as the ship's systems struggled to handle energies they'd only dealt with in simulations before. Lieutenant Park at navigation gripped his console as reality started bending around the ship. "Sir, I'm seeing. I don't know how to describe it. It's like space is folding in on itself." His voice held a mix of wonder and fear. The ship's A flashed new warnings across the main screen. Unusual quantum fluctuations detected. Core stability at 97%. Not dangerous yet, but not perfect either. Captain Lee knew they had to press on. There would never be a perfect moment for something this new, this revolutionary. 50% power, engineering reported. The humming grew louder, and crew members felt an odd sensation in their teeth, like biting on aluminum foil. Medical officers reported strange readings from everyone's biosensors, but nothing immediately dangerous. Through the external cameras, they could see the space around the Pathfinder starting to twist. Stars seemed to stretch and bend, their light distorting as the massive energies of the core began to affect the fabric of space-time itself. 70%. The ship's frame groaned under forces it was never meant to experience. In engineering, technicians raced between stations, fighting to keep systems stable as power levels climbed higher than they'd ever reached in testing. The bridge crew fought down their rising panic as reality itself seemed to rebel against what they were trying to do. The viewport showed impossible colors, shapes that shouldn't exist, as space began to tear open before them. Core at 90%. The announcement was nearly lost in the overwhelming hum that filled the ship. Captain Lee felt a pressure in her head, like being deep underwater. Around her, crew members grabbed their stations for support as gravity seemed to flutter and dance. Final sequence engaged. The AI's voice somehow cut through the chaos. Core reaching maximum power. Space-time rupture imminent. Time seemed to slow down. Captain Lee could see individual drops of sweat floating in the air as gravity wavered. Her vision blurred, then sharpened to crystal clarity. She could feel her heartbeat, could almost see the quantum particles that made up reality itself. "Now," she commanded, her voice surprisingly clear in the mayhem. The Pathfinder lurched forward, plunging into a hole in reality that it had torn open. The sensation was indescribable, like being stretched in every direction at once, like being nowhere and everywhere, like seeing every possible universe simultaneously. Crew members screamed, but no sound came out. Colors that didn't exist flashed through the ship. Everyone felt their consciousness expanding, touching things human minds were never meant to comprehend. Time lost all meaning. It could have been seconds or centuries. Then, with a sound like thunder that somehow echoed backward through time, they were through. The Pathfinder burst back into normal space, trailing wisps of impossible energies. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as systems tried to cope with what had just happened. As the crew struggled to regain their senses, Captain Lee forced her eyes to focus on the navigation display. They had done it. They had crossed 50 light-years in an instant. But something felt wrong, deeply wrong, as if they had broken something fundamental in their desperate leap across space. Through the clearing viewport, they could see their destination star system ahead. But behind them, where the wormhole had closed, space itself seemed to shimmer and twist like a scar that wouldn't heal properly. The cheers on the Pathfinder's bridge died quickly as the first sensor readings came in. They had made it, 50 light-years in an instant, but something was terribly wrong. The ship's AI was flooding screens with warning messages faster than anyone could read them. "Status report," Captain Lee called out, her voice hoarse. Her head still spun from the jump, but years of training kicked in. Around her, the bridge crew shook off their disorientation and turned to their stations. "Hull integrity at 89%, reported engineering. Minor damage across all decks, but nothing critical. That wasn't too bad, considering what they'd just done. But then the science officer's voice cut through the chaos, and everyone's blood ran cold. "Captain, you need to see this." The main screen lit up with a view of the space behind them. Where the wormhole had closed, reality itself seemed to be cracking. It was like looking at a broken mirror, but instead of glass, they were seeing the fabric of space fracturing. The science officer's hands trembled as she adjusted the sensors. "The distortion is growing," And it's not just here. We're picking up similar readings from our exit point near Earth. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Sir, I think we damaged something. Something big. Through the viewport, they could see nearby stars flickering like candles in a wind that shouldn't exist. The ship's quantum sensors were going crazy, showing impossible readings that made senior scientists shake their heads in disbelief. Incoming transmission from Earth, announced communications. The message was delayed and distorted, breaking up every few words, but what they could hear was terrifying. Reports of strange phenomena near the jump point, time running at different speeds, gravity acting weird, people seeing things that couldn't possibly be there. The ship's doctor rushed onto the bridge, looking worried. Medical bays flooded with reports of headaches and nausea, but there's something else. People are having experiences, seeing things, feeling things. It's like the jump changed something in their minds. Captain Lee forced herself to stay calm as she processed the flood of information. They had achieved their goal, proved that faster-than-light travel was possible. But at what cost? What had they broken in their rush to push beyond normal space? New contact. The tactical officer's shout drew everyone's attention. On the long-range sensors, something was moving near the distortion field. Something that didn't match any known pattern or signature. Something that shouldn't exist in normal space. The senior physicist stumbled onto the bridge, his face pale. The tears in space-time, they're not just holes, they're more like wounds. And they're getting worse. He pulled up a series of calculations on his tablet. If these readings are right, the damage could spread. Maybe across the whole sector, maybe further. Through the ship's external cameras, they could see the nearest space station reacting to the anomaly. Its stabilizers were firing constantly, trying to maintain position as local space twisted and warped. Small objects floated past the viewport, debris from the station's outer layers, torn loose by fluctuating gravity fields. Another transmission from Earth, communications said. This one was clearer, and the fear in the controller's voice was obvious. The distortion near Earth was growing faster than predicted. Research stations were reporting quantum events that defied the laws of physics. There was talk of evacuating the nearby lunar colonies. Captain Lee stared at the main screen, watching as their instruments tried to make sense of what was happening to space itself. They had spent years planning this mission, checking and double-checking every calculation. But somehow they had missed this possibility. They had torn a hole in reality, and now that hole was growing. The ship's AI spoke up, its usually confident voice now uncertain. Warning: quantum field instability increasing. Recommend immediate action to prevent cascading failure of local spacetime. The computer paused, then added something that made everyone's skin crawl. Unknown entities detected within distortion field. Nature cannot compute. Origin cannot compute. Threat level cannot compute. They had succeeded in reaching the stars, but as the crew of the Pathfinder watched reality unravel around them, they realized their triumph might have come at an unimaginable price. Back on Earth, chaos was spreading. The night sky over the Pacific Command Center looked wrong, with stars appearing and disappearing like flickering lights. Inside the control room, screens showed footage from around the world, each report more disturbing than the last. Sir, we've lost contact with Lunar Base 3, a young controller reported, her voice shaking. On the main screen, the lunar facility's signal had gone dark. The base sat too close to the growing distortion field, where space itself was becoming unpredictable. The chief of operations watched as his team struggled to make sense of what was happening. Reports flooded in from every continent. In Beijing, office workers recorded videos of rain falling upward. At Cape Canaveral, scientists watched in horror as their instruments showed time flowing at different speeds across their facility. Another incident in London, someone called out. The footage showed a busy street where people stood frozen, staring at something no camera could capture. Witnesses described seeing shapes between the seconds, things that existed in the cracks of reality that the Pathfinder's jump had created. The physics team huddled around their stations, trying to understand what was happening. Their models and simulations hadn't predicted this. The tear in spacetime wasn't healing itself as they'd expected. Instead, it was growing, spreading like cracks in thin ice. Update from the International Space Station, announced communications. The astronauts reported seeing impossible colors spreading through space like oil on water. Their instruments were going haywire, showing readings that broke every known law of physics. In the medical wing, doctors were overwhelmed with patients reporting strange symptoms. People who had been near the original jump point described feelings of déjà vu so strong they couldn't tell past from present. Others spoke of dreams where they lived entire lifetimes in other worlds, only to wake up minutes later. The military was mobilizing, though nobody knew exactly what they could do against a threat to reality itself. Fighter pilots reported their instruments failing as they approached the distortion zones. Some described seeing multiple versions of themselves in their cockpits, each making slightly different decisions. "Sir," a scientist burst into the control room, clutching a tablet. "The readings from Antarctica, you need to see this." The data showed something unprecedented. The weapons research facility near the South Pole had detected objects appearing out of nowhere. Things that looked like they were built by hands that weren't human. At the Quantum Research Lab, the world's leading physicists gathered in an emergency video conference. Their faces were grim as they shared their findings. The Pathfinder's jump hadn't just torn holes in space, it had damaged the boundaries between dimensions. Reality was bleeding into itself. Outside the command center, people gathered in crowds, staring at the strange lights in the sky. News helicopters captured footage of geometric shapes forming in the air above major cities, perfect squares and triangles made of what looked like folded space. The stock markets had been closed after traders reported seeing future prices overlaid on their screens. The world's economies teetered on the edge of panic as people realized that the laws of nature themselves might no longer be reliable. In orbit, satellite operators watched as their equipment showed multiple versions of Earth, each slightly different. Communications became nearly impossible as signals began arriving before they were sent. The internet slowed to a crawl as routing systems failed to handle data that existed in quantum superposition. The chief of operations received a direct call from the United Earth Government's Emergency Council. Their questions were simple but terrifying. How far would the damage spread? Could it be stopped? And what would happen if reality itself continued to unravel? As he tried to form answers, alarms blared through the command center. The distortion field had just swallowed a small island in the Pacific. When the satellites finally got a clear image, the island was still there, but changed. It looked like it had experienced 1,000,000 years of evolution in an instant, covered in structures and life forms that had never existed on Earth. The Pathfinder project had promised to revolutionize space travel. Instead, it had started a chain reaction that threatened the very fabric of existence. And somewhere out there, 50 light-years from home, the ship's crew watched helplessly as their triumphant achievement turned into humanity's greatest crisis. In the Pathfinder's main physics lab, screens covered every wall, each showing a different aspect of the growing disaster. The lead physicist hadn't slept in 36 hours, his eyes red as he stared at the latest calculations. Behind him, his team worked frantically, fueled by coffee and fear. "The tears are growing exponentially," he explained to the captain, pointing to a graph that showed reality literally coming apart. "These microfractures in space-time, they're like cracks in a windshield. Each one makes the whole thing weaker, leading to more cracks." The ship's AI projected a holographic model of the affected space. Red zones marked areas where physics itself had become unreliable. They were spreading, joining together like drops of water on glass. Earth was already surrounded by a web of these distortions. "Look at this," said one of the younger scientists, pulling up new data. "The quantum readings. It's like the universe is trying to heal itself, but it can't. Our jump didn't just punch through space, it changed the rules about how reality repairs itself." In the corner, a specialist in theoretical physics had covered a whiteboard with equations. She stepped back, shaking her head. "The math shows something impossible. These aren't just holes in space. They're holes in the laws of physics themselves, like we damaged the operating system of the universe." The captain watched as another simulation ran on the main screen. It showed possible futures, each worse than the last. In some, the tears spread across the entire galaxy. In others, they created zones where time and space became meaningless, trapping whole solar systems in bubbles of chaos. "We need solutions, not problems," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. What are our options? The team shared uncomfortable looks. They'd been working on ideas, but none of them were good. The first scientist pulled up a new set of calculations. We might be able to use the wormhole core again, he said, not to jump, but to generate a controlled quantum collapse. In theory, it could seal the tiers. In theory? The captain asked. It's like trying to fix a broken cup by breaking it again in exactly the right way, another scientist explained. If it works, the quantum fields might reset themselves. If it doesn't, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew the risks. Through the lab's window, they could see engineering teams working on the core. They'd been modifying it based on new calculations, pushing the technology in ways it was never designed for. The whole ship hummed with power as they ran test after test. The ship's doctor arrived with more concerning news. The crew's showing strange symptoms, she reported. It's like their minds are picking up echoes from other realities. Some can't tell which memories are real anymore. Time was running out. Reports from Earth grew worse by the hour. The tears were affecting more than just space. They were changing probability itself. People reported seeing alternate versions of their lives, glimpses of paths not taken. Some claimed they could remember things that hadn't happened yet. The physics team gathered around a new set of readings. Something was moving in the tiers. The sensors couldn't identify what they were seeing, but patterns were emerging. It was as if something from outside normal space had noticed the damage and was trying to get in. We need to make a decision, the captain said. How long until the core modifications are ready? The lead engineer checked his tablet. 2 hours, maybe less if we push it. He paused, then added, but Captain, even if this works, there's no guarantee the ship will survive the quantum collapse. We're talking about forces that could tear apart reality itself. On the main screen, another simulation showed the possible results of their plan. Best case, the tears would seal themselves, leaving only scars in spacetime that would eventually heal. Worst case, they could make the damage catastrophically worse, creating a cascade failure that could unravel the fabric of the universe itself. As the team rushed to finish their preparations, alarms sounded throughout the ship. The tears were growing faster now, and something was definitely moving inside them. They were out of time. Whatever they were going to do, they needed to do it now. The bridge of the Pathfinder had never felt so quiet. Captain Lee stood before her crew, every eye fixed on her. The decision they faced wasn't just about their survival, it would affect everyone and everything in existence. "Show me the plan again," she said. The main screen lit up with a diagram that looked deceptively simple. The Pathfinder would position itself between the two largest tiers in space, one near Earth, one at their current location. They would overload the wormhole core in a very specific way, hoping to trigger a controlled quantum collapse. Like fighting fire with fire, the lead physicist explained, his voice rough from lack of sleep. We'll use the same force that caused the tears to seal them. But he hesitated, looking at the crew. The energy required. There's no guarantee we'll survive the attempt. Through the viewport, they could see the nearest tear growing larger. Inside it, impossible colors swirled like oil in water. Sometimes, shapes moved in those colors, things that shouldn't exist in normal space. The sensors were picking up more of them now, getting closer. "What about evacuation?" someone asked. The captain shook her head. They all knew it wasn't an option. The nearest rescue ships were light years away, and the emergency pods wouldn't help, not with reality itself coming apart around them. The ship's doctor stepped forward with her latest report. 3 more crew members have slipped into comas, she said quietly. They're experiencing all possible versions of their lives simultaneously. The human mind wasn't built to handle that kind of input. On the tactical display, red zones marked areas where spacetime had already been corrupted beyond repair. They were spreading faster now, merging together. Earth was nearly surrounded, and similar damage was spreading from their location. "Time estimate?" the captain asked. The science officer checked her readings. At the current rate of expansion, maybe 6 hours before the tears become too large to contain. After that, she didn't need to finish. They'd all seen the simulations of what would happen next. A message came through from Earth Command, breaking up with interference. The situation was getting worse. Major cities were reporting temporal storms, areas where time flowed differently from one street to the next. People were seeing ghosts of themselves, versions from other timelines bleeding through the weakened walls of reality. The engineering chief appeared on the bridge, his uniform stained with coolant fluid. "The core modifications are ready," he reported. "We've rebuilt it to channel maximum power into a single burst." But he looked around at his crewmates. "The containment field won't hold. When we trigger the collapse, the core will breach." Everyone knew what that meant. The Pathfinder wouldn't survive the attempt. They were talking about a suicide mission. The captain walked slowly around the bridge, looking each crew member in the eye. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks of experimental spaceflight. But this was different. This was choosing certain death to save everything and everyone they had ever known. "I won't order anyone to stay," she said finally. "This is a volunteer mission only. Anyone who wants to try for the emergency pods has my permission to go." Not a single person moved. The tactical officer's console beeped, another warning. The things moving in the tiers were getting bolder, pushing against the thinning barriers between dimensions. Whatever they were trying to break through into normal space. The captain returned to her chair, feeling the weight of command more heavily than ever before. They had one shot at this. If they failed, or if they waited too long, reality itself would unravel. If they succeeded, well, they wouldn't be around to see it. She looked at her crew one last time, scientists, engineers, soldiers, all of them heroes about to sacrifice everything to fix what their historic mission had accidentally broken. "Plot the course," she ordered, her voice steady. "Take us right between those tiers. We're going to save our universe, even if we have to break every law of physics to do it." The Pathfinder's engines hummed to life as they began their final mission. Behind them, Earth hung in space, surrounded by growing cracks in reality. Ahead lay their destiny, and perhaps the last chance to save everything they had ever known or loved. The Pathfinder moved through broken space, its engines straining against forces that shouldn't exist. On the bridge, warning lights flashed as the ship's systems struggled to cope with the impossible environment. They were heading straight for the point where two massive tiers in reality met, like sailing into the eye of a storm made of broken physics. "Core power at maximum," engineering reported. The whole ship vibrated with contained energy. They had transformed their revolutionary wormhole drive into something new. A quantum bomb designed to reset the fabric of space itself. The captain gripped her chair as reality twisted around them. Through the viewport, they could see both tiers now, massive wounds in space that pulsed with impossible colors. Inside those wounds, things moved, shapes that hurt the eyes to look at, beings from dimensions that shouldn't touch our own. "Distance to target point, 10,000 kilometers," called out navigation. The officer's hands shook as he guided the ship through space that didn't want to behave normally. Sometimes the distance sensors showed they were millions of kilometers away, sometimes mere meters. Space itself was breaking down. In engineering, the core glowed with power it was never meant to contain. Coolant systems hissed and sparked as they fought to prevent an early detonation. The engineers worked frantically, knowing each adjustment might be their last. "Multiple contacts," Tactical announced, fear in their voice. The things in the tiers had noticed them. Dark shapes moved through the twisted space, drawing closer to the ship. The sensors couldn't make sense of them. They existed in too many dimensions at once. "Shield integrity failing," reported security. "Whatever these things are, they're trying to get in." The hull creaked as forces beyond human understanding pressed against it. Crew members felt their minds twist as reality around them became less and less stable. The ship's AI spoke up, its voice distorting. "Warning, quantum field collapse imminent. Recommended safe distance, cannot compute. No safe distance exists within current parameters of spacetime. 5,000 kilometers to target point," navigation called out. The tiers were larger now, filling most of their view. The space between them shimmered like a soap bubble about to pop. That was where they needed to be when they triggered the core. The captain opened the ship-wide channel. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Whatever happens next, I want you all to know, what we do here today will never be forgotten. We're not just saving Earth. We're saving reality itself." 2,000 kilometers. The entities from the tiers were all around them now. Through the hull cameras, they could see them pressing against the ship, shapes that switched between angles that couldn't exist, beings made of mathematics gone wrong. Core containment at critical levels, engineering reported. We'll only get one shot at this. 1,000 kilometers. Time started doing strange things on the bridge. Some crew members saw themselves as children, others as old men and women. Past and future blurred together as they approached the point where space itself ceased to make sense. 500 kilometers. The captain took one last look at her crew, the finest people she had ever served with. In their eyes, she saw fear, yes, but also determination. They had started this by accident, but they would end it on purpose, with courage and sacrifice. Core ready for detonation, engineering reported. On your mark, Captain. 100 kilometers. This was it, the point of no return. The captain touched the command console one last time, entering the final sequence. Around her, the crew braced themselves, each lost in their own thoughts of home, of family, of everything they were about to save. Mark. The captain pressed the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the world turned inside out. The wormhole core released all its energy at once in a way it was never meant to. Light brighter than 1,000 suns filled the bridge. Every crew member felt their atoms sing with energy as space itself began to reset around them. The Pathfinder disappeared in a blast of pure quantum energy, taking its brave crew with it. But as the ship died, reality held its breath, waiting to see if their sacrifice would be enough to heal the wounds they had accidentally created in the fabric of existence itself. 3 months after the Pathfinder's last mission, the night sky above Earth looked normal again. The strange colors were gone, the tears in space sealed shut. But humanity would never forget what had happened, or the price paid to save reality itself. At the Global Space Center, scientists studied the data from that final day. The quantum collapse had worked better than anyone dared hope. When the Pathfinder's core detonated, it had reset the damaged portions of spacetime, like restarting a computer to fix corrupted files. The scars are still there, the head researcher explained to the United Earth Council, pointing to subtle distortions in their readings. But they're stable now. Like scar tissue on reality itself. Behind him, screens showed the locations where the tears had been. The space that looked slightly different, shimmering in ways that their instruments could barely detect. In orbit, the International Space Station had become a memorial. The crew had mounted a simple plaque listing the names of everyone aboard the Pathfinder. Every time the station passed over the site of the original jump point, the instruments picked up a faint quantum echo, a reminder of what had almost been lost. The world had changed in subtle ways. People who had been near the tears sometimes reported strange dreams, memories of lives they might have lived in other realities. Children born in the affected areas showed unusual abilities to understand quantum physics, as if their minds had been touched by their brief exposure to other dimensions. At universities around the globe, physics textbooks were being rewritten. The Pathfinder incident had taught humanity hard lessons about the nature of reality and about their own limitations. The Wormhole-Core project was officially suspended, its research sealed away until humanity was ready to try again. But not all the changes were scary or negative. The incident had united humanity in a way nothing else ever had. When faced with the unraveling of reality itself, all human differences had seemed small and petty. That spirit of cooperation lived on, leading to new advances in science and technology, safer ways to explore space, this time with more caution and wisdom. The captain's last message, sent moments before the final detonation, had become famous. It was carved on monuments and taught in schools. The universe has rules for a reason. Today we learn to respect them, not by stepping back in fear, but by moving forward with understanding. In the quantum research lab, a young scientist studied the filtered readings from deep space. The things that had tried to break through from other dimensions were gone, driven back when the tears were sealed. But sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night shift, the sensors picked up strange signals, like something watching, waiting, maybe learning from humanity's mistake and sacrifice. The military had changed its approach to space exploration. The new ships being built weren't just warships anymore. They were research vessels designed to study and understand rather than just push boundaries. Each one carried a small piece of the Pathfinder's hull, recovered from the quantum debris field, as a reminder of the cost of moving too fast. On the anniversary of the incident, cities around the world dimmed their lights for 1 minute. People stepped outside and looked up at the stars, remembering how close they had come to losing everything. Parents told their children about the crew who had sacrificed themselves to save not just Earth, but reality itself. In the end, humanity's first faster-than-light journey had failed, but it had succeeded in something far more important, teaching an entire species about courage, sacrifice, and the delicate balance of the universe they called home. At the new Space Academy, a display case held a simple captain's chair. Below it, a small screen played the last images from the Pathfinder's bridge, brave men and women facing the impossible with courage and determination. Above it, words glowed softly. They saved more than they knew and gave all they had. The stars still beckoned, and humanity would reach them someday. But they would do it differently now, with respect for the forces they worked with, and remembrance of those who had taught them the true cost of rushing into the unknown.